In 2011, the USAID Land Rights and Community Forestry Program in Liberia came to an end. This is a look back at the program and its impact on Liberia.
The forestry sector in Liberia helped to fuel civil conflict in the country. It was used to buy arms to fuel the conflict both in Liberia and Sierra Leone. And it was so bad that the international community wanted to do something to stop it. And in 2003, the UN Security Council placed a sanction on the import of Liberian timber from all member states. And that, of course, brought a lot of international attention to reforms that were needed in the sector. And in the U.S. ambassador at the time, Ambassador Blaney, wanted to do something constructive to help the sector reforms occur, and then actually have the sector restart on a much stronger footing with reforms in place. And the different donors that met together to work with the transitional government at the time identified a new strategy to actually move the sector forward. And what they did was they took the attention much more off of solely commercial activity and tried to balance it with other objectives in conservation and in community forestry. And so they came up with this 3C approach.
The evolution of community forestry started early in 2005 when we had the first international workshop on community forestry. It was attended by about 100 national and international partners with key stakeholders in Monrovia. In our workshop, this is where the whole idea came about community forestry. How can we define community forestry in the context of Liberia, and to look for the way forward, and what would be some of the challenges in community forestry. That's the evolution of the whole community forestry. We developed what called the National Forestry Reform Law of 2006. In that law, to be particular, Chapter 10 mandated the authority to come up with a comprehensive community right law. That law has been developed. Coming out of the law is a regulation to implement community forestry program. Now, that's a major achievement by the government through the Forestry Development Authority.
The Community Forestry Department of FDA actually was a requirement of the Forest Reform Law, because what the Forest Reform Law essentially did was to create community forestry, commercial forestry, and conservation forestry as the main activities in forest management in Liberia. And each activity would be managed by a specific agency within the FDA generally. And then the Community Forestry Department worked with USAID in particular and others to create the Community Forestry Program, the LRCFP.
In 2005, an international conference in Monrovia resulted in the Monrovia Declaration, which recognized the importance of community forestry. Following the Monrovia Declaration, USAID began to exploit community forestry. In 2007, with experts from the U.S. Forestry Service and the Department of State, USAID designed a land rights and community forestry program.
Land rights and community forestry got up and running in early 2008, and immediately we had some adjustments we had to make to really make the program a success. First and foremost, the idea of the program was to work with villages to look at their natural resource tenure issues and their land management issues and forest management concerns at the community level. And the idea was that Community A would be right next to Community B, and we look at Community A's forest management concerns, Community B's forest management concerns, but then also the issues they had together, issues and maybe disputes, land disputes they had about ownership between the two communities. But what we rapidly found was that these decisions about land tenure and property rights, about forest management, anything to do with natural resources, wasn't really at the village level. it was much more at the clan level. People, decision makers like clan chiefs and elders in the clan made decisions that affected those villages, and also those villages couldn't exclude people from other parts of the clan area the way they could people outside of a given clan area. So it made a lot more sense to look at this at a broader landscape level at the clan level. So instead of working with 4 villages, which would have meant, I don't know, a few thousand people impacted by the project, we worked at the clan level, which automatically brought the number of people contacted and the number of people involved in the program up to over 20,000. A big challenge at the very beginning of the program was trying to figure out how to develop the legal and regulatory framework to really allow the community forestry activities to unfold. You know, we were doing pilot activities in the absence of a law. I mean, there was the National Forestry Reform Law of 2006, which mandated FDA to develop a community rights law that would really explain what community forestry activities could look like and the manner by which communities could engage in community forestry on their own. But we didn't have the framework in place, and so we went. But it was very important to test the approaches, even though they weren't finalized, in these pilot sites. And other development partners in the country were also working in a few other sites as well, trying to learn and then having that inform the development of the law, the Community Rights Law of 2009, as well as the accompanying regulation to that law, which is being finalized now, which allows communities across the country to begin to develop community forestry if that is something they'd like to do in their communities. So at the beginning, it took a lot of work, and there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of trust had to be built between the government, especially with the Forestry Development Authority, as well as civil society organizations that were really trying to keep an eye out for communities and the interest of communities as we were developing this legislation. In the course of developing the regulation, we began to bring in community members. We had more to say about what community forestry could be like. The people in the communities where we were working now had an experience as well that they could bring to bear. And so the regulation has a lot more community input. And I'm hoping everything we do later, revising regulations, developing new policies, will be very much an endeavor where communities are at the table with everybody, because that's the only way that this kind of program and this kind of initiative can work.
The project really arose out of several activities and processes that were happening around the reforms in the forestry sector in Liberia, and also, of course, the interactions between players in the forestry sector and partners like USAID. The main challenge that was being responded to by the creation of the LRCFP was the requirement in the 2006 Forest Reform Law that there in fact be a community forestry program, and that communities begin to engage in forest management but also benefit from the management of those forests. And for that to happen, 2 questions had to be answered. Firstly, how could communities be organized in order to participate in the forest sector? But secondly, how could communities have legal rights to forests so that their participation in the forest sector would be based on a legal system which recognized communities as owners of forests in the same way as the state can be owners of forests. So those were the issues that was the background to the LRCFP. The central focus of the program was to develop a model for community forestry. In other words, work with a few communities to find out how those communities could manage their own forest resources and use that model to apply to the rest of the country. And now this is happening in a situation where you don't have any history at the policy level, at the implementation level, and at the community level of communities managing their own forests. Because remember, prior to the 2006 law, forests had always been managed by the state, with no participation of local government, no participation of communities. So the biggest challenge was, how do you create a model where you don't have any previous experience? And there was a lot of learning that was done by all of these cooperating, I would say, agencies and ideas and communities and the government to figure out what best could be done in order to create community forestry in this country.
one really big issue at the beginning of the program was the relationship existing between the communities and the Forestry Development Authority. The Forestry Development Authority's approach to the forest management was very much that they were the technical leads and that they were going to enforce what communities were doing. And so the relationship was pretty rocky at the beginning. And I remember when we opened the county office in Nimba County, the communities were there. They were very concerned about what this project would bring and that they didn't want to have the same type of engagement with FDA.
Because FDA never okay no wa ko loko nu wa bo yigen wa ge ga wize wa ko mianu wa pugo kure bu wa ko fa ko pe kan wen ko ti anu o le ta be ni wa ge du o kan o du kan be o lu ba wa e ba ko me sa ga ko ngo fe ko le ko pele ke ko ba ayi za yi de ba ko amable ko wa ka amable benze yo ko la ga te e ke ba ni mo ko ngo fe ka ka ile ya di na nu babo ile mo nu ba kle we mo la we ko na ka we do ka ki ga ton me ka ka pele ke ka e ka me ka pe ka ke go ne la ki le ni abe o su ke ton te o su ke du ki srebe mo ile FD ne ka ile ko ngwa ke to yo bun se pie ile ko ba pa jima ile be ni we zo me abe e ka wa ni o fe ne ba be lo wa bu mu si o ke mo tin ya ka ke ko ma kri ike ko pie za we ko we to kele ba we ka nyu ya because company ga sia giga no be ko le be mo se gba ke kiri ai de gba ko be ko ba wa gigile be ko ta ko ki ba ko su ke du pie ye ke mi wa bi se be zo me be kuru ko me ko we do ki wa ko le ko to ne o be wa yo le wa to ne ile ame me ko ko gitu e be class ga ile bula e bu ko mo de ku ko ki ba every me era ti e bi me onu ba wa gile pe no la wa ka mo ka gi ka ma ka ki no fe ka every me ka
forestry me wa zo me no yi pie be yin ya ka sadie ka de wo do mu e o won pie yi de ayi gruma yi sagi me pakuo ma na sagi me pakuo abo kuiwa me wa sayade ka won lo ka se ka kwa sene to le kwa benefit ye kwa gba po ye kwa ka kwa nasi wo gruma me ne ida ido ikuo ye forestry me yin di gbo ikura FD me ba de ka die kwa ye nu obo library se bia se be wa ka yi se nu da committee gbe citizen gbe re se ka pa be oro pa so aba ba wi se de gbe go po wu ese to na pie we ikun we bo kun o ba nakun da bo forestry nu ogbo ba yisuo ya pa o ba yisuo re gbongbon da wa ku bore yi de na forestry ka di ka gbe aye yin wo na gbe pa da kwa ko ba be yiwe gbo yi ni da ko ba.
There was a issue between the entire community of Zogba and Say. We in the early 2003, if I'm not mistaken, they were during the transitional period when the government created the East Nimba Nature Reserve as a reserve because of its significance of biodiversity component that we have there. After the creation, there are other requirements that need to be met. One of the key requirements were to delineate the whole area so that you can clearly see where is the protected area and where the community will be able to do their other intervention in terms of farming, that they live on farming. So we hired one of the local NGO to carry on awareness to let them know, look, we are about to demarcate this protected area. That was under the regime of Honorable John T. Wood. But regrettably, the local NGO that were hired did not do sufficient awareness. So we, FDA, with the assumption that there was awareness, we went there and just introduced ourselves to the chief, went into the bush to start demarcating the land. The community raised the land and took our policies against FDA. You would not demarcate. This is this is where we live, this is our property, we have been living here. If you want to delineate a forest area, you have to consult us. So when the ARD came, they met the issue on the ground. They said, look, I think we have the expertise to intervene in the whole process.
Our first engagement with the communities was actually with the community leaders in communities neighboring the East Nimba Nature Reserve. And at the time that we began that engagement was also at the time that FDA was trying to demarcate the boundary of the nature reserve. And this had been occurring in a situation where there had not been adequate interaction between the community and the FDA. And so tensions were very high. And communities were viewed the establishment of the nature reserve as expropriation of land from themselves. And they were completely against the establishment or the demarcation of that nature reserve. So when we started interacting with these communities and essentially presenting the idea that they could in fact secure ownership over their own forest resources, it was very difficult for them to comprehend and to even believe that this was a possibility, because they saw government processes as resulting in them losing the forest and not gaining the forest.
The Land Rights and Community Forestry Program has also focused on increasing incomes for communities that traditionally rely on the forest.
I experience a lot. They educate us to leave the forest, to come and then come to the lowland to plant. In doing so, they educate us in making nursery. All of these things were on nursery. Okay, because we not just come, because we used to just destroy the forest by making farm. Okay, because we never know the importance of it. So the people can educate us on how to leave our forest and come and make farm on the lowland. Again, every year we change location. That's what we used to do. But when LRC came, they educate us. Okay, by leaving the forest, even we can use the place for another year. Okay, because they taught us how to do it. They gave us the idea what to do so that we can help ourselves. Just starting because they don't want, it will help me a lot. Before planning the green powder and the GOP, I thought wise to make cassava farm and planting, to carry the market while waiting for the other one to come up. I'm going to help my children to go to school. I help myself to buy my clothes. I help myself to uplift my living.
BOTPA is a group called the identification of BOTPA is Botanical Product Association of Liberia. We are basically involved with NTFP. From the beginning, we started with Graphonia mainly. The idea of collecting Graphonia came actually from our community forest program that was brought here by FDA, which is LRCFP. That we should try to engage ourselves into NTFP collection, meaning Graphonia. It will also help to conserve our forests.
Actually, yes. When we started with the active collection of Graphonia, it happens last December up to March this year. And during the process, there were a lot of community that benefited from the Graphonia collection and the selling. During the purchasing and the buying system, some people were able to get a motorcycle to enable them to get access to the community that have the Graphonia to the market. People that have Graphonia in their various community forests, they is being preserved right now, and a sustainable management is going on to make sure that every now and then they will be able to make money, to put money into their pocket and help their children to go to school and do other family issues. School personally, even last year, my children went to school through the Graphonia collection, and the money when I sell and the money that I got, I was able to sustain my family.
I was very happy with the Graphonia program from the beginning, because after we started buying, I earned good money from there. Although I was able to start my little lady, but Graphonia added up my money until I was able to see myself somewhere that I was not. Right now I have my own motorbike. that I'm doing. You know, I'm very happy. I even want to continue with Graphonia in my life.
Let's hear. Land Rights and Community Forestry program will end this year, but we're designing a follow-on activity. USAID remains committed to the community forestry concept and working closely with the government and the Forestry Development Authority to make that happen. We have a new poverty reduction strategy currently in development now that will come online next year, and this idea of community forestry will be heavily embedded in the forestry section of that document, and we'll continue to work with our partners here in the country to make that happen. We have the laws in place, we have the regulation in place, we know what it takes now to develop community forests and to register them, and how to develop a relationship between government and communities that's more productive and constructive. And so we hope that this concept will really take on in Liberia. And in the course of this follow-on project, we'll see a lot of communities interested in the concept and even asking the FDA how can they apply and what they need to do to register their own community forests. So we're really excited at FDA about what the future holds and working closely with the government to make that happen. You know, a lot of people don't realize that this is much more than a forestry project. Whenever anyone has gone out with us to look at the activities in the field or talk to any of the project beneficiaries, either in the field or here in Monrovia, what they rapidly find out is that it's really a governance project in so many ways. It's really allowing communities to start to have a say in what's done in their communities through this project, where communities can ask the FDA to put a certain amount of land aside for their own use and management, and then work with the FDA more as a partner rather than being directed by FDA on what they can and can't do. And it's really changing the way people think about their engagement with government at the local level and at the national level. It's gotten people a lot more confident, and you can see it in their faces, and you can see it in the way they talk to FDA, that they're no longer this meat group waiting to hear what government has to say, but they actually have their own opinion on what needs to be done and what their role in that is. And so that's a really, really important part of this project, in addition to the livelihood and the forest management activities. This part really strikes people as something really transformative, and that's really what AID is all about.